When a marriage begins to fall apart, it rarely happens all at once. It often follows a quiet, predictable pattern, one that many couples don't recognize until the damage feels irreversible. Understanding these signs early can mean the difference between saving a relationship and watching it slip away. According to Becky Whetstone, a marriage and family therapist from Arkansas and the author of the upcoming book, I Think I Want Out, the slow unraveling of a relationship is not random at all. After more than 2 decades of working with couples, she found that nearly every failing marriage travels through a series of identifiable emotional stages. She even compared this knowledge to understanding cancer symptoms. The earlier you detect it, the more you can do to heal it. Whetstone's discovery was influenced by the pioneering work of sociologist Diane Vaughan, who explored the stages people go through when ending intimate relationships. Vaughan's research, published in her book Uncoupling: Turning Points in Intimate Relationships, revealed that most breakups follow an eerily similar trajectory, no matter who you are or where you come from. Inspired by this, Whetstone conducted her own detailed interviews with couples who had faced separation, seeking common patterns in their stories. Though she didn't set out to replicate Vaughan's findings, her research eventually mirrored them almost perfectly. What she uncovered were distinct emotional phases that almost every dissolving marriage experiences, phases that mostly happen inside one partner's mind long before any breakup talk ever begins. This is one of the most heartbreaking realities about relationships. The person who decides to end things, the decider as Whetstone calls them, often keeps their true feelings secret for a long time. They might appear calm or even content on the surface, but internally, they're struggling with frustration, disappointment, and confusion. By the time they finally express how unhappy they are, they've often emotionally checked out. As Whetstone explains, unhappy partners tend to keep the depth of their distress hidden until it's almost too late, which is why regular, honest communication is so vital to keeping a relationship alive. The decline of a marriage typically begins quietly. In the early phase, known as disillusionment, one partner starts to feel that something is missing. They may notice small annoyances that didn't bother them before, or feel emotionally distant without fully understanding why. Yet, instead of confronting the issue, they convince themselves to wait and see. Relationships, after all, have ups and downs, don't they? They hope that with time their feelings will shift and things will return to normal. But the silence itself becomes dangerous. Sociologist Diane Vaughan once said that when partners keep relationship-related secrets about what's hurting them or what feels wrong, a tiny breach begins to form, a gap that widens the longer it's ignored. What begins as a quiet disappointment can slowly evolve into deep disconnection. If the early signs are missed, the relationship often enters what Whetstone calls the erosion stage. At this point, the discontent has deepened. The unhappy partner begins to accept that their sadness isn't going away on its own. But they still aren't ready to leave. They tell themselves they can't, at least not yet. There are children to think about, shared finances, family expectations, religious beliefs, or simply the fear of being alone. They start to justify staying even as resentment builds. This is when subtle signs begin to show. Sarcastic comments, irritated tones, dismissive looks. These behaviors often stay private, hidden from friends and family, but within the home, the tension is unmistakable. Cracks appear in the emotional foundation, but instead of repair, many couples choose avoidance. Over time, that avoidance leads to emotional detachment. In this phase, one partner begins to pull away, not necessarily out of cruelty, but as a form of emotional self-preservation. They start seeking fulfillment outside the marriage, finding comfort in hobbies, work, friends, or even an affair. They convince themselves that as long as they have something meaningful beyond their partner, they can still survive in the marriage. But in doing so, they begin to mentally check out. The focus shifts from shared joy to personal survival. Every flaw in the relationship feels magnified, and the good moments fade from memory. By now, outsiders can often sense the strain. The coldness, the distance, and the unspoken hostility begin to seep out in public. What was once private pain becomes visible. Then comes the breaking point, what Whetstone calls the straw. It's that single moment when the unhappy partner finally realizes they can no longer pretend. It might be a heated argument, a small act of disrespect, or even an innocent remark. But to them, it feels like the final confirmation that the marriage is over. It's rarely just that one event. It's the culmination of years of unspoken hurt that finally crystallizes into certainty. In that moment, something inside them switches off. They emotionally unplug, stop trying to fix things, and silently decide they can no longer be part of this relationship. From the outside, this shift can look sudden and shocking, but for the person experiencing it, it's been building for a long time. Once the switch is flipped, they rarely go back to seeing their partner the same way again. Finally, the relationship enters what Whetstone refers to as the death of the marriage. This doesn't always mean legal divorce, but it marks the end of what the relationship once was. The emotional bond has dissolved and the dynamics can never return to their old state. Sometimes couples can rebuild from this stage if both are willing to start fresh, but it requires tremendous effort and honesty. The status quo is gone forever. Even if they remain together, the marriage that existed before has effectively ended. Despite the grim progression of these stages, Whetstone insists that not all hope is lost. The key, she says, is recognizing and addressing problems early, ideally during the erosion stage, when both partners still have emotional energy left to repair the damage. Many couples make the mistake of waiting too long, allowing resentment and distance to harden into apathy. By the time they finally seek help, it's often too late. People assume therapy is only for broken marriages on the verge of collapse, but in truth, counseling works best as a preventative measure. The sooner couples seek support, the more likely they are to reconnect and rediscover what brought them together in the first place. Kurt Smith, a therapist based in Northern California who specializes in helping men navigate relationship challenges, agrees with this proactive approach. He says most couples delay counseling until they're already considering divorce or have even spoken to a lawyer. Waiting for problems to fix themselves rarely works. The common phrase, "time heals everything," doesn't apply to relationships in crisis. Time alone often amplifies pain rather than curing it. Smith believes that as soon as partners notice persistent issues they can't solve on their own, they should seek professional guidance. At that stage, progress is faster, easier, and much less emotionally draining. By contrast, once bitterness and hopelessness take root, even the most skilled therapist may struggle to help. Another major misconception, Smith notes, is that both partners have to agree to therapy for it to make a difference. In reality, meaningful change can begin even if only one person is willing to try. When one partner starts to grow, reflect, and adjust their behavior, it often influences the other to follow. While a marriage ultimately needs both people to rebuild fully, the first step can come from just one side. The important thing is to start. The central lesson from Whetstone's and Vaughn's research is simple but profound. Relationships rarely collapse overnight. They deteriorate gradually, often in silence, as unspoken grievances and unmet needs pile up. The earlier couples can detect these warning signs, the more they can do to prevent emotional erosion from turning into complete detachment. It requires courage to admit when love is faltering, but that honesty can be the very thing that saves it. Ignoring problems out of fear or pride only gives them more power. True connection demands vulnerability, awareness, and consistent effort. In the end, marriages are living systems. They breathe, evolve, and sometimes struggle to survive. The difference between those that thrive and those that die often comes down to timing and attention. Knowing the stages of decline isn't about predicting failure. It's about recognizing opportunities to intervene, to listen, and to repair before it's too late. Because while love may fade quietly, it can also be rekindled by the same thing that started it in the first place: a willingness to truly see
and be seen by the person you chose.